Hello and welcome to Art Talk. My name is Dan Cooney and we're here with
Max Wickemeyer.
And we're going to look at a show here at Gallery X in a neighboring town of New Bedford, Massachusetts at Gallery X. And the name of the show is Friends for Life. And it basically revisits the story of this man named Arthur Lopes, who started collecting artwork 40 years ago from art students who went to the Swain School of Design. I inherited that collection and it has since grown to over 100 something pieces.
His place was like a hangout. You know, the students hung out there. I remember vividly people coming and going, whenever I was there.
Yes, yeah, he was such a character. Anyway, let's go take a look at the show.
Oh wow, there he is. That's exactly the way I remember him.
Yeah, so that's Arthur Lopes. He's the guy, that this show is about. He was the one who created this special community for Swain students.
He was a magnet for the students, and they would paint for him and give their paintings to him, and he would line his apartment with all these paintings.
And an unlikely character to do that too. He had no prior art interest or experience. He was just a friendly guy who lived in the neighborhood, retired vet, and he created this community. We call it Friends for Life. It was a phrase that he would often use after he met somebody for a little while. And
is that you?
that's actually me. Yeah, I had hair. I was still wearing hats back then.
And that is his apartment. So you must have used photographs to help arrange your gallery?
Yeah, as part of the collection that he left, he had over a dozen photo albums that he had put together. He left with Chuck Houck, and we've been able to use that as a reference point to help recreate his gallery space as best we could. So
let's go look.
Just take a look. Are you ready? Let's go take a look.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. This really looks cool. I mean, I remember his place was filled floor to ceiling with the paintings, and so much talent. Yeah. How did you get the idea of this? When did you get the idea?
Well, he died in 1980. I was a senior, and we were all kind of shocked and such by it. But I had the idea at that point after realizing that this collection was just going to disappear unless somebody took care of it. So at that point, I offered to talk to his only surviving relative, which was a half brother, a retired fire chief in New Bedford, and he gave me full permission to take responsibility for the collection. So that was back in 1980, and I just kept thinking, well, I don't know where life was going to lead me, but I just thought, somehow we got to keep this collection together somehow. So what I did with the help of a lot of the other students, we brought all the work out of the apartment, and then we stored it over at Swain School of Design, and we put it up in a show, and we put up signs and posters to say, anybody who wants to take their work back, come take it back. Mm-hmm. I think maybe half the work went at that point. I think originally there was about 150 paintings hung just like this in Arthur's original apartment, salon style we call it. And about half of it people took back. The other half, well, a little over 50 something paintings, I took. I think it was just before winter break. They wanted us to get them out of the school.
I remember because I helped you with that.
That's right.
And we were pulling paintings out of underneath cubbies and storage areas and just amassing. And I think the paintings kept on coming. I didn't know when they would end. So I carried probably just about all these things at one point or another.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness you
house.
You had a house. You had a storage space in your basement. I remember putting plastic sheets over there and a humidifier, dehumidifier, and we set this thing up so that it would store it. And it ended up, most of the stuff stayed there almost 20 years.
Yeah, incredible.
Because, actually not quite 20 years, because I think after about 15 years, you moved to a new house. And we did take some of them to your house. where you actually ended up framing a lot of
17
them,
years.
right?
17 years.
I mean, how many frames in here do you think you did?
I see about 4 or 5 that I've done.
That's all?
Yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
thought there was more than that.
Well, you know, I framed all of your paintings, right?
Right.
So, what I would have framed for this collection would have been, you know, hey, we want to put it on the wall, let's get a frame on it, and you know, enjoy
Well,
it.
this is one you did, right?
Yeah, I did that. That frame is actually baseboard, colonial pine baseboard molding that was in my house, and I removed it. So it's a little bit of recycling going on, as well as a nice. I like the color too. We painted our front porch door the same color. So,
Really?
yeah.
So it inspired you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great frame, and it really
I love
enhances the
painting.
piece. That's
it's hung
from
in a long time in my house.
that one's from Kenny Hatch.
Old Arthur right there. I mean, there is so much going on in that painting.
Yeah, that one's done by Scott Redmond, who has a show upstairs right now in Gallery X.
That is, you know, Arthur.
It's always one of my favorites.
So mystical, Arthur. You know, he had different personalities. I would say, you know, sort of very friendly, always asking questions, wants to make sure you're having a good time and happy.
Yeah.
And
Well,
other times pensive and sort of you know, thoughtful.
well, I think we can look at the work and see that there's maybe a dozen portraits of Arthur in the show. There's at least 1 or 2 on every wall.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think you're right. Each one does capture a different mood and a different part of his character. And what a character he was, really.
Absolutely.
And in addition to portraits of Arthur, of course, there's a lot of portraits of the students. Arthur was great at asking students to do a portrait. He was very encouraging. He'd say, "Yeah, I'd like to have a portrait of you in my collection." So as you look around, you can see quite a lot of
Well, why don't you point out a few of
self-portraits.
the self-portraits for us?
So
Obviously, that's Arthur.
that's one of the Arthur. Like I said, there's one of at least one of Arthur on every wall, and that one by Paul Corellis, again one of my favorite Arthur portraits. Really captures a sort of pensive, serious Arthur. That's a self-portrait of myself.
Look a little like Steven Tyler there.
Oh, really? Yeah. Again, with hair.
With hair.
And there's Donald Beale, great self-portrait by Donald Beale. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. And I think this is just a shot of a model. Then we come over to this wall. We have Tom Breca, Tom and Daryl Dwelly. It's a pen drawing from the original collection. Sandra Maximum is over here, portrait. Mark Barry, self-portrait. Portrait of Dave Barnum that I did. This is a great shot of Arthur by Matthew Perry, who now lives in Vermont and kind of runs
Sort of a Sergeant Pepper's kind of
art gallery up there. Yeah,
Sort of
that's
a pop
great.
Sergeant Pepper's look.
Really captures the spirit of Arthur's just joy of, you know, being with people in community and
Art.
and fun and whatever. This is a portrait by Stacy Netherland, who wasn't in the collection originally. There are a few pieces that have been fit in from the enhanced, cultivated collection. This is was an early teacher of mine.
It really is reflective of a continuation of the tradition that he said of collecting Swain students' art and fine art, oil paintings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Great.
no, absolutely. He did have an effect on I think anyone who knew him. Probably still collects artwork today because he made it seem natural and easy to just collect the artwork, trade, buy, sell of your friends. And if you're in the art world, why not? And this is what this has led to. But Stacy Netherland was a great New Bedford area painter, and I think she may have even taken classes at Swain School earlier on. But she's been deceased for maybe at least 10 or 15 years now. What else? A gal named Heidi, who was, I forgot her last name, but that's a portrait of her. This is a portrait of me by Gary Pickett and Donald Beale again. This
You know, and I remember so many of the students would say, it's art for art's sake.
Yeah, Art himself said that. He had a lot of quotes, and I think we have a whole list of all his quotes listed
Okay.
in one of the newsletters.
Oh, we should check those out. So maybe sit down on the couch and...
Try to find a few.
Yeah.
Sure.
Great. Man, look at all these albums. There must be thousands of photographs in these things.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that everybody in these photographs is 40 years older today.
If they're still around.
Yeah, that's true. A few of us have passed.
Wow. Some 70s looks going on here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, leisure suit.
Yeah.
There's Arthur. And
Yeah, there's the apartment. Yeah.
Yeah.
You see, we have plenty of references to see how to hang the work here.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, just before we move on to the rest of the gallery, I wanted to point out a few more of the works that are in this corner. A great classic, I think, from the early part of the collection from Melby, Nebraska. Tim Snow, that's a portrait of Arthur by myself. Here's a portrait of Arthur. We still don't know who the artist was. Everyone has their suspicions. I think it might have been Greta Briglio, who has since passed away, so we don't have confirmation of that yet, but we're trying to figure it out. We've got a Kevin Kincaid. I don't know if you can see it behind there. Joe Alexander. Mark Webber. Now, I think that's a portrait of Mark Webber, not by Mark Webber, but Mark was the first one to meet Arthur, and it all grew from there. A couple more portraits of Arthur. We got Bob Rodericks here. This is a Darrell Dwelly, a great Darrell Dwelly, and who else? We got Rose Carini. This is also Rose Carini, another Melby, Nebraska. And again, back to Scott Redmond's and Richard Vaness, a self-portrait Richard Vaness did, actually for me, in an exchange we did a couple years after Arthur died. And finally, a classic Chuck Houck, one of the first in the collection as well. And that's it. So, we'll take a look at the rest of the collection. That's outside of the recreated room now. Thank you.
So Dan, tell me about the rest of these paintings and ones that didn't make it to Arthur's apartment.
All right. So, the apartment, the recreated apartment was essentially I tried to put all of the original Arthur work in there. But of course, since I inherited Arthur's collection, I've expanded it. I've got a lot of other art friends that I've met in my life, and I've bought, sold, traded, and inherited a few other pieces. So on this wall, you've got a collection of this 4 pieces from another collection that we inherited from this woman. This is a self-portrait. It's Karen Englund, a good friend of ours, who passed away a few years ago. But she was an art student at Tyler School of Art in Pennsylvania at the time. Concurrently, I think, or just before we were at Swain. Kind of interesting, very good painter, and we got quite a bit of portraits from her collection. But only a few of them are represented here in this show. In addition to that, I've got work from my grandfather. This is G.B. Dunn, and a portrait he did of my grandmother. And some things from my nephew, my kids, other kids. I always liked children's art, so included some of that. Some other paintings from the Bedford folks. That's a painting of John Landry I did from way back when. Butch McCarthy did this one. And I've got a couple of works here from Gene Anthony, who was a guy from the 60s, who actually coined the phrase "Summer of Love" and did a lot of photographs of the hippie days, Haight-Ashbury, and we actually shared an apartment when I lived in San Francisco for a while. This one of George Harrison and Patty is one of my favorites. What else?
Did they hang out in Arthur's apartment?
No, they didn't. No, this was an expansion of the collection. Now these are also works from my grandfather. These are from some of my students. I taught several years at Bridgewater State and at Massasoit State.
Taken with a pinhole camera, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Group shot, pinhole camera, signed by all the students in the class.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then finally, a few other people that I worked with and collected. Rob Lawrenson piece. He's a professor at Bridgewater State. And then there's some more over on this wall that we finished with that are more of the abstract style, I guess. So we want to take a look at that?
Yeah, let's do that.
So there's a story behind every single one of these pieces, but most of them were collected later, either through work association or from school association at UC Berkeley. This one, Enrique Chagoya. Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of them, but let's just take a look at some of them. We've got Kenny Hatch, we've got Mercedes Nunez, we've got Rob Rutherford, we've got Robert Huff. What else? Peter Lee, who was part of our freshman class. He left us, I think, right after he graduated. Jim Murdoch, Diane Conlon.
That's a silk screen, isn't it?
It is a silkscreen, yeah. She did a whole series of these, quite nice. My good friend Cameron Shaw, and my other good friend Philippe Lejeune. Nice collection here. And then finally, here's a piece that I did in a reconstructive phase of my own work. All right, and finally finishing the show, we've got a couple of small pieces by Robert Huff, my brother-in-law. And then one of my favorite pieces is from Susan Fong, a fellow art student that I knew in California, who's now a doctor.
And I'm certain that's a Max frame too. I framed that.
That's right, it is a Max frame. Well done.
Okay.
We got
Good
one
job.
last thing I want to show you. There's an interactive piece as part of the exhibition. You want to see it?
Yeah, definitely. So is this the interactive part of the exhibit?
It is. I think, as you know, Arthur always liked to have his picture taken with anybody he met. And he was famous for that. That was before selfies, before cell phones, in fact. Yeah, so we recreated the experience. So 40 years later, you can still have your picture taken with Arthur. You want to do it?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So put your hand here, and the hand here, up here, up here. Hi, we're over here at Gallery X on William Street in New Bedford, and we're installing the Arthur Lopes Friends for Life exhibition. It's an alumni show that revisits some of the Swain School of Design work and then more work that's been added to this collection that I inherited 40 years ago. So we're in there installing it now, and hopefully it'll all fit. I don't know about you, but I, as a young 20-year-old, took it for granted. I thought all art schools, like, this is just an average art school. I didn't realize till later that it was really a special place at a special time.
Because I was in the service first and then went to BCC, I realized when I got here that it was something unique. And one of the things that really pushed me over the top is I used to go in the morning at 7 in the morning. On the days that I was supposed to meet David, you know, this is the day that he would come into the studio and spend an hour with you.
Sure.
And he realized I was going in at 7. My meetings with him were at 9 or 9:30. And he realized I was going in at 7 o'clock. He started showing up at 7 o'clock. He said, if you're going to be here, I'm going to be here. Yeah. And we ended up having like 3 or 4 hours together every week.
Where else can you get that
go to
ever?
the library, we just talk about books, talk about painting, talk about this.
Yeah.
It's like, nowhere else do they do that. And Sig would say, you know, if you're here and I'm in a class, come in. Yeah. Come in and draw. Yeah. You don't have to be in my class to use my class clean. So I won't go over to your painting and talk, but you can get your practice and you can use the model, just keep going. Yeah. So every day I was in somebody's class, and then I did my own studio work at night. Yeah. It was just a remarkable place.
It really was, yeah.
And what's really cool is, like, it ends up being like a fraternity. Yeah. Because it was so small in its entirety that everybody kind of, it's like, if you come to an opening, if you don't know anybody, you're still swinging. Come over here. Yeah. Get over here. You're one of us. There's never any doubt.
Right. And when we did have a show, when there was a show at the Crepo Gallery, Everybody would show up, everybody, the teachers, every student would show up, and then there would be a party after, and everyone would
Everybody
go,
would go
teachers,
forever.
whatever. It was that kind of community.
Yeah.
I've never seen that anywhere else.
No.